Welcome to On Production, presented by Rapbook. In today's episode, we're diving into the heart of Colorado's film scene with two key figures from the Colorado Film Office. Donald Zuckerman, the Colorado Film Commissioner, is a veteran producer with an impressive filmography that spans various major film festivals and includes working with some of the biggest names in Hollywood. Alongside him is Arielle Brachfeld, Deputy Film Commissioner, an Emmy-nominated filmmaker with a rich background in film production and advocacy. Together, they're shaping the future of filmmaking in Colorado. Donald, Arielle, it's good to have you both on the show.
Thanks, Cameron.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, my pleasure. So Donald, with such a diverse background in producing and event management, what led you to your role as Colorado Film Commissioner?
What actually led me to it is that about a half a dozen movies that I produced were George Hickenlooper directed. And John Hickenlooper became the governor of Colorado. And John Hickenlooper was in a couple of our movies. So in the year 2000, we were making a movie called The Man from Elysian Fields, which starred Andy Garcia, Mick Jagger, James Coburn, Angelica Houston, Juliana Margulies, Olivia Williams. And John Hickenlooper was a bar owner in Denver at that time. This is just prior to him becoming mayor of Denver. And he was an extra in that movie, and he's in it about that long. And then I got to know him. I started to get to know him. Then he became mayor, and I was here for a film festival. And then we did another film that he actually had a line in Canada. We did a film with Kevin Spacey and Barry Pepper and a number of other notable stars. George and I made a reality TV series about John Hickenlooper being mayor, which, by the way, no one wanted to buy. And anyway, when he became governor, he asked me to come here and work for him. And we, at the time, we lived in West Hollywood. We had a 2-year-old daughter, and my wife and I thought it would be a better place to bring up a kid. So here we are.
And that's amazing. Can you share a memorable experience from your producing career that has influenced your approach as film commissioner in Colorado?
I don't know if I could easily share. I think one of the advantages that I have, I've worked with a lot of film commissions because we followed incentive money to a lot of different places. So I produced 2 movies in New Mexico, 2 in Toronto, 1 in the UK, 1 in Georgia, 1 in Michigan, all following incentives. And one of the things that I learned is that I'm not trying to denigrate other film commissioners, but very few film commissioners know anything about film finance. And when you're in the independent film world, it's not just find a rich person if you're a really low budget movie, or maybe if you're a bigger movie, maybe a streamer or a studio will finance it, but you have to learn how to put together the pieces, senior debt, monetizing, soft money, equity, etc. And so when Arielle and I get into conversations with filmmakers who are trying to put something together, I can usually tell whether the people have the skill set to put that together if they're trying to put that together. And a lot of times we can kind of predict many people call us and tell us they're sure they have the money to make their film. And I'd say that, 8 out of 10 of them don't. And frequently we can pretty much figure out who's going to have difficulty getting it together and who isn't going to. So we can have an intelligent conversation with somebody and sometimes even help them.
Speaking of having intelligent conversations, Arielle, I know that you all must be constantly speaking together, you and Donald, and figuring out with your filmmakers how they can best utilize Colorado and their budget and the incentive. But I'm curious, as Deputy Film Commissioner, and I believe the first staff member from Western Colorado, what unique perspective do you bring to the Colorado Film Office?
Sure. So I come from production. I worked my way up as a PA and fell in love with producing after serving as like a producer's assistant and, working my way up through production office. So I'm firmly aware of what a lot of our localized production deals with in terms of smaller budgets, things of that sort. I worked in LA for about 12 or 13 years, and in between projects for, speed or discovery or low budget film, I began to be involved heavily with educational initiatives. And Colorado has always been home. My husband and I couldn't wait to get back to Colorado, and the opportunity came for us to do so and start a family. And we landed in Western Colorado, which surprised even me at the time. But I fell in love with the beauty of it and saw the potential between the film school programs and the access to resources. Unlike Los Angeles or some other more film-friendly areas, there was an excitement and a willingness to participate with film in rural Colorado that I wasn't used to coming from LA. Access to locations, access to resources.
What's interesting is Arielle came here as a filmmaker, and our office started to work with Arielle and her husband, and they make these creature features. And the amazing thing is they make really good quality, but they also, most people who make films that cost that little get zero distribution. And they've been selling their films to Lionsgate. So when the position opened up, we were lucky enough to get Arielle to come on board. And the other advantage is everybody else is on the eastern or the front range of Colorado, and she's on the western slope. So she's in Grand Junction by the Utah border. And that way we can service the whole state better than we can with just somebody from Denver.
One piece of that perspective, though, between some of the educational background that I have, working with the office prior to joining the office and being located in the community, is seeing how impactful certain programming can be to build up industry. You have these incredible natural resources outside of, urban communities that add a tremendous amount of production value and increase the likelihood of sales and, better sales and things like that, the more production value that you can have. So being located in Western Colorado with these various resources, including just community willingness to utilize those resources, it really impacted sales of projects that we have recently done. A lens to the work that I do where, at this point you can create content that's of a professional level from your home office. I mean, realistically, Cameron, you're located, not in Los Angeles, not in New York. Like it's become decentralized. And there's no reason why these rural communities can't reap the benefits of, building a viable crew, building these resources that can better support production that comes through, or even create production locally. So that perspective has influenced a lot of the work that I'm doing with the film office in terms of more direct engagement with rural communities, more educational outreach, and looking at the state from a holistic perspective.
It's fantastic. For folks considering filming in Colorado, it's really great to know that both of you have such an extensive background, not only in understanding the ins and outs of the production culture of the state, but that you also yourselves have been in the trenches of production and really understand what it takes to make a great film. Arielle, I'm curious, can you talk about your experience in film education and how it impacts your current role?
So just to start, I feel insanely lucky that I love my job. Like how many people can see this, and working with Donald, really being able to fulfill that desire to increase workforce development opportunities and educational opportunities is exceptional. Well, I was in Los Angeles for almost 3 years. I served as the film project manager for Los Angeles Unified School District, which is the second largest district in the country. It's severe inequity across the district. You know, a lot of impoverished students, marginalized students, and through that, in LA, there was a disconnect between the educational system and industry. There were schools that were literally on the campuses or bordering studios that had no interaction with this industry. So the pathways for students to get access to these high-paying quality jobs wasn't there in the heart of LA, in the heart of the entertainment industry. And a lot of what I started doing was community development and enrichment programs, creating mentorship programs, hands-on opportunities for students to network and mentor and learn with people and create opportunities for them to get jobs with or without a 4-year degree. And moving back to Colorado, and obviously, you know, Colorado doesn't have the studio system that Los Angeles has. There's less opportunities to knock on the studio door and be like, hey, hire these kids or create, you know, these internship opportunities. So we're looking at local providers. There's really sizable commercial industry in Colorado, and there's media content creators in every county. So it's looking at the resources to create jobs that can then deepen or impact the film industry, you know, as it's developing in Colorado. It's been really exciting to you know, roll up my sleeves and put in work and see effects in my own backyard in rural Colorado. I firmly believe that film saved my life, you know, dealing with depression and everything else. It was a home for me. And I know that in certain counties in rural Colorado, the suicide rate is twice the national average. So not only are we creating pathways to good paying jobs, but I really feel like we're making a difference in day-to-day lives.
That's fantastic. This question's for both of you. How would each of you describe the current film production culture in Colorado?
It's kind of a difficult question. We have a lot of people who are trying to succeed in filmmaking in Colorado, and we actually have some terrific companies doing content creation. We have a couple gaming companies that have grown significantly. One that 6-7 years ago had 10 employees, and as of right now they have 115. And but we have the biggest problem that we've had in growth is having consistent film incentive. We've had we don't have anything comparable to our neighboring states. The most we've ever gotten in 1 year, I think, was $6 million. But there have been years we've only gotten $750,000 in incentives, and New Mexico currently gets $110 million a year. Utah gets about $12 million a year. Arizona, I think, is $100 million currently. They were $75 million last year. Oklahoma is many times us. So we have, this is an incentive-driven business. And one thing that one learns when they're a producer is that you can cheat almost any location. So I like to use an example. I was an executive producer on a movie in Canada called Casino Jack, and 100% of the movie takes place in either Washington, D.C. or Miami, and yet you see Kevin Spacey running up the steps of the Capitol. You see John Lovitz in Miami Beach, and neither one of them ever left the Toronto vicinity. And it's it's a green screen. We just did MOS, one camera, half a day shoot in Washington, D.C., and a half a day shoot in Miami, and it all worked out, and it was cheap to do. So, and we were a Canadian content picture. So we, as a result of being Canadian content, we got about a little over $3 million on a little over a $9 million film. But anyway, So you do learn a lot when you're a producer. I don't know how to do a lot of the things that Arielle knows how to do. I'm more of a business of film guy than than knowing all the creative angles. As Arielle reminded me earlier today, I always can hire a good production manager or a PM or line producer, and she usually has to do it all.
In terms of the culture of Colorado, I would say too, Colorado people tend to be very helpful. There's time and time again where we'll reach out, and if we're unable to facilitate a request, or if we need additional info for be it resources or locations or rentals, things like that, we can reach out to our active producers in the area. People are always willing to help, which is very, very different from what I experienced in Los Angeles. People are willing to recommend others for jobs. People are willing to step in and help in a way that the other community that I spent a lot of time in didn't mirror. So in terms of Colorado culture, I think that's a really big positive, is that there's a collaborative sense with the working community, and there's a sense about wanting to help others step up.
This question's for both of you. What are some unique advantages that Colorado offers to filmmakers?
First of all, we literally have everything here but the ocean. And as I mentioned before about cheating, that's not a hard cheat. And we have a huge desert here that's a national park. It's the highest high desert in America, the largest high desert in America. We have mountains. We have unique pioneer towns and great main streets and little towns all over the place. And we also have great air transportation. Third busiest airport in the world. There's literally a flight an hour from Los Angeles, with 3 airlines competing, so the ticket prices are never high. A lot of states don't offer that. It's very hard to get in and out. Louisiana, for instance, if you're working in Shreveport and an actor says, hey, look, my daughter's graduation is and I want to go home and I'll be, I'll come back the next day. You don't know if you're going to make the production doesn't know if they're going to make the connecting flight in Texas. And here they don't have the connecting flight. And so that's a big advantage. And then the other thing, aside from locations, and this is partly because we don't have as robust a business, locations here tend to be unbelievably inexpensive. We had a film come here, and they shot in a town called Niwot, which is outside of Boulder, and they took over the main street for 2 days. They re-signed every business on the main street, and the location manager said to me, guess how much money I spent to do this? And I said, how much? And he said, $400. I mean, you can't rent a shack in New Mexico for $400. And I'm not knocking New Mexico. It's a great place to work. I loved working there. People are really nice. The union people are all fantastic. But those are 2 big advantages that we have. Arielle, do you want to respond?
Yeah, so I just wanted to kind of sing the praises about how inclusive our incentive actually is. When, as Donald mentioned, this is an incentive-driven business. When we're talking with productions looking at Colorado versus another location, a lot of times the advice is to go back to the line producer, knowing how inclusive our incentive is, and measure out line by line the cost difference. And with your software, with Rapbook, that may be, more easily done than not. But because we include above and below the line, because we include, just about any vendor expense in Colorado, we include payments to loan outs if there's proof of Colorado withholding. I mean, it's a really generous incentive. So even though ours caps at about 20%, people tend to get more bang for the buck because even airfare's included, rentals are included. As I mentioned, above and below the lines included, non-residents are included. So it's a really generous incentive for people looking at film here, which is why we run out all the time.
And Louisiana is generous too. There's no doubt about it that most things are included in Louisiana and some other states, but some states are just only include residents, or there are some states that they cover your airfare flying in the state but not out of the state. I mean, things like that. If you booked your ticket through a Colorado travel agent, you're covered. So we try to make it really simple for people, and we're really just a 3-person office. We have 3 of us, and then we have we have one guy who works for another part of the Office of Economic Development who does our audits. But we try to make it really easy for people to apply, and we try to make it easy for them to come here and work.
That is awesome. Donald, can you elaborate on the film incentives available in Colorado and how they've evolved under your leadership?
Well, it's very hard to say because they've been up and down. I mean, we had a number of years at the very beginning where we started with $3 million a year, and then it went down a lot. And part of it, we have certain problems that other states don't have. We have something called TABOR, the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. So when the state is going through a boom time in business and they collect more money, they have to give that extra money back to the taxpayer. So we have a flat tax that's the same for everybody. It's about 4.4%. But if the state can only collect the more money than the year before by the increase of the population and the increase in inflation. So when we were having for a long time a 2% inflation and population might increase by 1% a year, the state could collect 3% more a year and spend it. But there were times that we would collect 10% more, and all that money, extra money, would have to be returned to the taxpayer. And there are a lot of and there's been, there have been administrations that have tried to change that, but they can't change it without a vote. And most people will not vote to be taxed more. And so we've been competing against the school systems, for instance. And our school systems tend to be relatively underfunded compared to other states. Yet we're one of the wealthiest states in the country. I think we're ranked 6th or 7th in the country in terms of the wealth of the state, but we sometimes rank in the low 40s in terms of educational spending per pupil. So it's very hard when you're trying to talk to a legislator and say, hey, we really could use $20 million a year or $15 million a year. They say, well, we don't have it. This past year, we're trying to switch to a tax credit. And the good thing about a tax credit is everybody in the world of film finance is familiar with tax credits. And this is a refundable tax credit, which is very nice. And we were granted $5 million, but there were some, well, I'm not going to get into the weeds, but there were some things that in the bill, because it was brand new, that needed to be fixed. And now we're going to fix them in January and February this year. And if we can, but the tax credit money does not come out of the general fund, so you're not competing against the education money. It comes out of a different fund. It comes out of the money that you give back to the taxpayers.
One thing that I want to add to what Donald said, just in terms of how successful the incentive has been, under Donald's leadership, we have about an 18-to-1 ROI on direct audited spend. So the program itself is really successful. And it gives us a lot of talking points in terms of asking for these increases. So now that this tax credit is kind of shifting the way that the incentive allocation is handled with our office, we're hoping to see further benefit and obviously increase the number of productions locally and non-originating in Colorado that we can accommodate.
Arielle, from your perspective, what do these incentives mean for local businesses and also incoming filmmakers?
I mean, I will tell you, having participated with the incentive program prior to joining the office, it was a massive, massive help getting to the profitability mark. You know, if I had a $300,000 picture and we got a 20% incentive, that means that we could hire on a cast member that could really push sales with that extra amount, knowing that was budgeted and coming back. You know, the investor would slug a little bit more money, or the sales agency would clear, additional cast or higher level cast. So it's a difference between a project being viable or not, honestly, especially when it comes to lower level production.
Yeah, locally, the towns that get a film just rave about what it does for their economy. I mean, Telluride, which is a wealthy town, when we did the Hateful Eight there, 9,000 hotel room nights. Yeah, when we did Fast and Furious 7's second unit, the town of Salida, every hotel within 20, 30 miles was completely booked because they had, a 300-person crew. And sales tax collections were unbelievably high, and it was a fringe season. And anecdotally, we were told, like, a knife store owner, 3 crew people come in and spend $18,000 on knives. The local mayor owns a gin distillery. He says that every year around Christmas, he has people who worked on that movie order cases of gin to give away, bottles of gin as a gift for Christmas to people. So it's just, when in Telluride, when the Hateful Eight came, all these crew people came from California, and a lot of them drove their own car, and they didn't know they needed something called a snow tire in Colorado. And one store sold $140,000 worth of snow tires. And they don't get any incentive money for this. This is individual people came in and bought snow tires. So, and the tire place was able to pay to renovate their entire business as a result of that. I mean, these little towns, when Our Souls at Night, which starred Robert Redford and Jane Fonda, Netflix made that. When they came here, these little towns just saw an incredible amount of business. And one small town, Florence, a lot of the shops on the main street, everything got painted, everything got fixed up because the filmmakers wanted it to look great.
There's residual benefit too. For instance, we had an HGTV show, Hometown Takeover, film last fiscal year. I'm sorry, 2 fiscal years ago, 2022. And this is a rural community outside the Denver area, and not only were we able to, we're only able to track audited spend. Once an incentive goes through our office, we're only able to track, like, okay, this is exactly what a production paid for X, Y, and Z. This is payroll, etc. But the benefit that this town, Fort Morgan, has seen a tourism boom from the show. Like, there have been people traveling to the town, supporting the local businesses, shopping in the local stores, making a run at the ice cream shop. And these local businesses are seeing this tourism benefit in such a palpable way from this HGTV show. So not only is there the direct spend, okay, these are the number of rooms that the production books, these are the restaurants that the production's utilizing, these are the local hires from the community that are getting paid to work on the show. But then a year later, people are traveling to the town to visit after watching it on HGTV. So I mean, I think we're preaching to the choir about the benefits of film and production, but it's really palpable.
So The Shining was written at the Staley Hotel in Estes Park. And as a result of that, they literally do 150,000 to 200,000 ghost tours at $30 a pop per year. Their guest shop does a couple $1 million in business per year. And it is, so aside from filling the rooms, a lot of day trippers come there, and it's at the entrance to the Rocky Mountain National Park, and 5 million people a year drive by it. And it's been an incredible business, and literally the hotel's been basically branded as the horror hotel. And we've been told 70% of the business in Estes Park, or 70% of the gross national product of Estes Park, is driven by that hotel. So people do come. Even many years ago in a town called Ridgeway, the True Grit was made with John Wayne. And every summer, people come and they take tours of where they shot True Grit. And you would think that was, 60 years ago or something like that, that people wouldn't care. Well, people still care. So, it drives tourism.
Arielle, are there specific initiatives or programs that you're excited about for the future of Colorado's film industry? I mean, Donald was speaking a little bit about what sounds like potentially some edits to the incentive in the next legislative session, but just from that perspective or anything else, anything that you're excited about?
Keeping an eye on time. I won't go over every single thing because we got a lot of really cool, innovative programming. I'm probably most excited about some of our workforce development programs. I mean, just a high-level overview, we have a free script review program. Any Coloradan is able to submit a script up to 180 pages and get professional coverage for free. So that's a massive tool for everyone from students to amateur to professional, screenwriters here in Colorado. We have regional liaisons that are located throughout the state that can help facilitate permitting, can help facilitate, locations, scouting, things like that. So those are really cool high-level programs. But I'm probably most excited about our workforce development stuff. So in 2022, before I started working with the office, I was working with the previous deputy in Donald on launching a rural program to get kids in high schools on the career pathway of film and media. Because this is a $400 billion global industry, and you really can make content from anywhere. And these are viable career pathways, even without a college education. So what we ended up creating was, it's called the Film Exposure Program, and it's now at 6 sites. It grew from 4 sites to 6 sites in 1 year, 6 rural high schools throughout Colorado. And it's a collaborative program. So inspired by some of the pandemic TikTok challenges where a prop would pass from one screen, one side of the screen to another. All these different school sites will create collaborative short film where each school site does 1 to 2 scenes, and they have a MacGuffin, like a pen that passes from one side of the screen to another. It drops in, or the locker opens up, and there's your prop. So all these different school sites are getting a crash course in filmmaking, scripting, production management, that producer mindset, critical thinking and problem solving, storyboarding, and then they get a crash course in actually running camera and recording sound and directing, and it's like this taster menu of film industry. We talk about all the different careers involved, and then they get to shoot their scenes. And then the scenes are edited together, and these kids that never would have had anything to do with each other, sometimes even in the same school district, are now creating this work of art collaboratively because of where technology's at. And there's professional mentors, so our local commercial creators or some of our local media content creators, sometimes narrative filmmakers are able to come on, mentor on site at the school, provide hands-on professional development for the teachers, as well as create those mentorship opportunities for students. Unfortunately, and I don't think that this is specific to Colorado, I really do think that this is nationwide, we are losing access to educational programs that focus on the arts. And we're losing access to film and media programs and AV clubs, and there's no public access stations anymore. So all these traditional routes about how people can get involved in filmmaking are disappearing. And with school budgets being what they are, we have to figure out these innovative ways to handle career and technical education and handle these career pathways that are extremely viable. And this is one innovative approach that's super fun. So the kids can create any scene that they want as long as the prop passes from one side to the other. And each school site gets a gear package and a long-term relationship with local filmmakers and content creators.
Yeah, Arielle started this program here and has been growing it, and there's a lot of interest in rolling it out around the state, and we're trying to come up with a way to fund that. And there's a possibility of getting some federal money to fund it. We won't get into that, but there's just that possibility. And we also do a lot of work with the Mountain Ute tribe and the Southern Ute tribe. Arielle, do you want to talk about that a little bit? Summer programming?
So Colorado has a lot of Native community presence. And again, these are generally communities that don't have access to resources, be it because they're in rural areas or there's limited, access to resources. And we, the office started this program a few years ago, 2019, where it would be a 2-week summer workshop. Filmmakers would come on site and stay on site at the reservation, work with kids, and again, give them top to bottom the experience of creating short form documentaries about topics that they actually care about. This last session, we worked with Ute, Mountain Ute, and Southern Ute, and one of the pieces was about the bear dance, which was just a really incredible moment that we were able to capture and shine a light on this amazing cultural heritage. And then the other was about a skate park, a place where the kids can actually go and be. And again, like you see the light bulb turn on as the kids are working and doing this. And it's like, oh, I can do this. There's a pathway for me to do this. And with Hollywood itself becoming far more inclusive and making space for different voices, it's great timing. So all of our programs have an entrepreneurial mindset. We talk about jobs, we talk about, career pathways, but there's also this idea of, an entrepreneurial mindset when we approach working, especially with youth. And it's so special. It's so special seeing those light bulbs turn on and seeing kids understand that this is a pathway for them and that they can do this. And then the work is just so freaking good, like sometimes it blows me away how good the work is. Those are two programs that we're really, really excited and jazzed about. One more that I want to highlight is we're doing production assistant workshops. So like 3-hour, overviews about entering into the field as production assistant. So set lingo, basic hands-on, instruction with C-stands and what a C-47 is, and all this great stuff, and talking about ways to get hired. Trying to have workforce development with teeth.
We also make a lot of films. A lot. So we make public service announcements. And these aren't like 15-second things that go on TV because that's not how it works anymore. They're generally a minute or a little bit shorter or a little bit longer, and we gear them toward different segments of the population. So we made 6 different ones for PPP loans, and they all go out on social media, so people are aware that they were potentially eligible for them. We make a lot of films about things that are important to the state. So, for instance, we made a really interesting half-hour show about hiring people with disabilities. Everything we do is very character-driven. So rather than have a guy standing at a whiteboard saying, hire people with disabilities, we meet 3 different people in a half-hour show that have an extreme disability, and we don't see that at first. We see them at work, this guy driving a giant combine, and he's talking about how he loves his job, and he's sitting 15 feet off the ground in this giant machine. And then we cut to his boss, and his boss says, best employee I've ever had, never late for work, never calls in sick, fantastic employee. And then we see him get out of the combine, and he needs a hoist that the state provides because he has no legs. And we make, I'd say we've made about 50 shows in the past 4 or 5 years, and we're in production on a number of them right now. And what's really good about them is most of them, we go to university, college, high school that teach film. We go to professors or teachers who generally are really frustrated filmmakers and are talented, but don't have the money, don't have the means, don't get offered anything, and we'll say, we can provide you with a relatively small amount of money, $10,000 or $20,000, to make a half-hour show about a specific topic that's interesting to the government, and then we get that show on PBS. We place it on PBS, so they get and students work on these films, get paid minimum wage to work on them, but they get a working credit on a PBS show while they're in college.
It's pretty amazing. I have a question related to how both residents, non-residents, maybe beginner or indie filmmakers versus more seasoned filmmakers should engage with the film office. From everything I've learned in our discussion, you all run an amazing program, from actually producing work, educational program, job training programs, managing the incentive. You did mention the audit though. So can you walk us through, let's start from if you're a more seasoned producer with a very real budget, but you want to utilize some of the beautiful scenery in Colorado, what's the best way to engage with the film office? And what is the process related to the audit? Can you give us a sense of timelines? And then for maybe some filmmakers that are not as seasoned, what sort of resources or expectations should they have, really figuring out if they should bring their production to the state?
So I just want to preface that we're in this transition to the tax credit. So I'm gonna talk primarily from the lens of our longstanding rebate program. We have a really simple pre-application that people can find on our website, and that alerts us to have an additional conversation with them. A lot of times, the more savvy producers or studios, the productions in that higher budget range, with seasoned personnel, will just approach our office directly. But there is that very easy, friendly portal for any level production to submit. And one thing I do want to highlight is we incentivize video games, we incentivize television, we incentivize web content, basically any media creation, documentary, etc., episodic. So it's open beyond just traditional view of film as well. So generally, production will reach out, we'll discuss and make sure that they qualify for incentive, that they haven't started principal photography prior to application, that their timeline makes sense. All projects have to be reviewed by our Economic Development Commission. They give final approval and they meet once a month. So sometimes that's a tighter turnaround for commercials or really fast-moving projects. So we just make sure all the ducks are in a row, and if they are actually able to move forward with a full application. There's a few different thresholds. It's generally $100,000 for in-state production originating in-state with a Colorado-based LLC. So $100,000 in-state spend for Colorado originating production. And then there's $1 million in-state spend for non-Colorado originating production. So a lot of times indie folks from outside the state aren't going to be eligible if it's not, above $1 million spend. So that's just kind of some groundwork, fetching the incentive. We have a relatively easy application. It's a 2-page application. It talks about anticipated Colorado hires. We do have a 50% Colorado local hire requirement that can be above and below the line. We talk about how we have to see proof of withholding to make sure that taxes are being paid appropriately. But yeah, it's honestly a very easy application process. And my experience even before joining the office was hands-on help. I was able to call the previous deputy weekly and make sure that I was aligned with maximizing that rebate allocation. Generally, the turnaround, it is a 2-step audit process for review. It is performance-based in terms of getting the previous rebate program, and it will be performance-based for the tax credit as well. For the rebate program, it was generally 45 days from when the CPA, the Colorado-based CPA, gave the report to our office to turn around our review. And if there was any discrepancies, we would handle it within the 45 days and say, all right, after our review, this is what you get. Please sign this form and we'll issue your rebate. For the tax credit, it is a calendar year tax credit. So that is shifting kind of the timeline of when productions can anticipate getting that tax credit certification.
There is a state requirement that when somebody turns in their paperwork, that we have to turn around the tax credit or the rebate, whatever it is going to be, within 45 days. I mean, so, there are some states that do audits that can take a long, long time. I've worked in New Mexico twice, as I mentioned, and they can take many months for the Department of Revenue to get around to doing an audit, partly because they're so busy. And it doesn't matter much if you're funded by Paramount, what's the difference? But if you're an independent film and you're paying an interest reserve and, monetizing it up front with loans and everything, the lenders are very experienced in knowing how long it takes the state to pay, and then they add some time. And they make sure that the interest reserve is for a long enough period of time, so it really diminishes how much money you get up front if you're using, independent film financing and monetizing things up front. So, one of the advantages we have is we can turn things around very, very quickly. And then the other thing is we do this more with locals, but we're not adverse to having having them turn their paperwork in twice. So let's say somebody's making a $1 million film locally and $200,000 is going to be spent on post. They can shoot their film, wrap, turn their paperwork in, get the 20% incentive, that's $160,000, use the $160,000 toward post, show us they spent the $160,000, then get 20% of that. And so they don't have to raise as much money. They can raise almost 20% less than what they need, and they don't have to borrow it from a bank, which might cost 15-20% per annum when you add in all the fees.
Okay, hold on, Donald. That was a very spicy tip. Would you say that again for our listeners?
Sure. So what we tell anybody who comes here, that we can turn their incentive around very quickly because we're required to do it within 45 days. And sometimes it only takes a couple weeks. So we'll allow people to basically turn in their paperwork twice, and they could do part of their film. So usually they shoot their film, get it in the can, come to us and say, this is how much money I spent. We say, okay, here's a check. Then they can use that check for posts. Then they can file on the money they used for posts, assuming they do their posts here. And, out-of-state companies rarely do their posts here for good reasons. I mean, usually you do your post where your director lives. because the post takes the longest. It might take you 6 months to cut the picture and do all the post work, and to have somebody, a director who maybe has a family, doesn't want to be sitting in a hotel room someplace for 6 months working. He wants to be home. But the locals, a lot of them are able to, they may be making a $500,000 movie, and they can go to their investors and say, look, all I need to do is raise 400,000, or and I can hit the number that we need. I can still hit the $500,000 budget because I'll get the $100,000 from the state and use it for post.
It's a great tip. This question's for both of you, and this is how we'll conclude today's episode of On Production. But what are your long-term goals for Colorado's film industry, and how do you see it evolving in the coming years?
Well, assuming we can get this tax credit worked out and up and running and going on a regular basis, we'd like to be competitive with some of the neighboring states. We don't foresee it ever being New Mexico or Arizona in terms of $100 million a year and the like, but there's no reason why it couldn't grow to be more like Utah, and that would provide enough business for the people who live here. A lot of the people who work in film here, they love Colorado and they want to live here, but they tend to work mostly in neighboring states. So if you're a really good location manager and you live in Colorado, you may find you work most of the time in New Mexico or in Georgia, Louisiana. They travel, but we'd like to keep them home. So ideally, we would grow this to have a better, a more consistent incentive. And we have a governor who's helpful. So that's how come we got a $5 million tax credit this past year.
Going off of that, in terms of supporting industry development as well, incentives are a key piece. We need sustainable incentives to have sustainable industry. But a lot of the truly innovative programming that we're rolling out in the educational space or course development space is there to help support and create, crew and film and media and TV workers. So I see the innovative solutions and programs continuing to grow and providing alternatives to workforce pathways that exist in other locations. And that's really exciting to me as well. But we need sustainable incentives to have that workforce development really take hold.
Arielle and Donald, thank you so much for your time here, joining me on production. Thank you for providing me a master class in Colorado film culture and production and incentives. Really a pleasure to speak with you both. Thanks for being on production.
Well, a pleasure speaking to you. And by the way, you are fantastic at this. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Cameron.
Have a great day.